So I just watched the face-off between Tszyu and Errol Spence, and it gave me some understanding and observations. So let me share my perspective. We will be going through 7 points. So the first point is the handshake refusal. So Errol Spence refused Tszyu's handshake. He framed it as a war mentality, not as disrespect. So he's ready for war. This to me indicates that he's ready to fight. And when you're ready to fight, you want to get into fight mode as opposed to friendship mode. Now it's important to remember that boxing is an art, but boxing is also brutal, and those two realities can coexist. And just to give you a reference, I remember when Manny Pacquiao fought Shane Mosley, both great fighters by the way. And I remember when they fought each other at the end of the round, Shane Mosley would go to touch gloves. And to me, that was a symbol of friendship. And I remember Bernard Hopkins making an observation that when you do that, to a certain extent, it could be an admission. It's just overly friendly. And when you're in war, yes, you touch gloves at the beginning, but not necessarily between rounds. And I can understand that. Now, the second point is that Tszyu has or did write off Spence completely. He admitted he thought that Spence was retired. The one thing I would say is that you just can't dismiss a talent like Errol Spence. But the context here is that he thought he was retired. But it's important to remember that if Errol Spence is even 70% of what he was, he will be a problem. He is a southpaw, good power, good speed, good accuracy, really good body punching, really good front foot fighter. So I guess from Tszyu, this is minimalization, and maybe it's a counter ploy for the disrespect that he feels from the handshake being rejected. And then the next point is the no tune-up, no apology. So Spence has been gone for 3 years. It's been 3 years. No tune-up fights. He calls it a waste of time. And to me, the advantage here, let's theorize about the advantage. Well, the advantage is the element of surprise. You've been away for 3 years. You have a new trainer. So there's that whole thing that you're going to do something different. So it's harder to prepare for. But there is a significant disadvantage. And that disadvantage is no momentum or a lack of momentum. The bottom line is that it's a risk, and the risk could backfire or it could work. Conventional wisdom states you should have a tune-up fight or maybe a couple of tune-up fights before. It's important to recognize though that Errol Spence has Ronnie Shields, and Ronnie Shields is a really good trainer. And the most logical conclusion here is that Ronnie Shields will have him prepared through an optimal boxing environment. Now, the next point is the sick gratification of enemy territory. So in the face-off, Spence described a visceral thrill from fighting in hostile arenas. For example, he fought in Kell Brook's backyard. Now, the Kell Brook fight was competitive, and unfortunately for Kell Brook, he put himself in a compromising position in that fight because he came off the Triple G fight and he had to lose a lot of weight. So according to him, the preparation for fighting Errol Spence was more about losing weight as opposed to being fighting ready. And that had an impact on his performance. That's not to take anything away from Errol Spence though. He was vicious that night and it was a very good performance. But it's interesting that the enemy territory, that stimulates Errol Spence. He thrives in those conditions. And this goes to show that, you know, different boxers have different psychologies. Certain boxers are unable to go to other people's backyard and operate as effective, while others will thrive in those conditions. And then the next statement, or the next idea within this face-off, was the Tszyu's legacy frame, where he states explicitly that this is his defining moment, framing it as bringing the biggest fight ever to Australian shores. Now that is really putting pressure on yourself. So I don't really know why he's doing that, because if you're going into a fight and you're like, this is my biggest fight, that to me is added pressure. But again, every boxer's psychology is different. So maybe that makes him train harder. Maybe that makes him work harder. Maybe that makes him fight harder. But what it does probably mean is that he will be prepared for the moment. He's going to train optimally, and he's going to, put it all into the preparation. Also, his trainer has a wealth of experience. So they're a very experienced team. And then the next important part, is that Ronnie Shields is in Errol Spence's corner. And it's important to realize that Ronnie Shields will have him probably return to the fundamentals, establishing the jab, controlling the tempo, rediscovering his ring IQ. Like, this is a solid boxing person in his corner. And I will assume that Ronnie Shields will be able to create a great boxing environment because he has a wealth of experience at a very high level. For example, he has worked with Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, Pernell Whitaker, and the Charlo brothers. And then the next part is Tszyu's game plan. And this is assumed that there will be a non-stop pressure motor. And there's two potential outcomes here. Either he overwhelms Spence or he runs into that surgical counterpunching. I would advise that he needs to be careful walking down Spence, because if you're not using feints, angles, and deflections and setting the appropriate traps, you will walk into his counterpunches. So that's the problem, isn't it? It's like when you put front foot pressure on an elite boxer, you have to do it in an intelligent way. Otherwise, you will be made to pay the price. So this is my final statement. Think of this. This fight may not be decided by who talks the best, but by who handles the psychological weight when the opening bell rings. Now, Spence is betting that experience, adversity, and a rebuilt foundation under Ronnie Shields can overcome 3 years away, while Tszyu is betting that momentum, pressure, and belief can carry him through the biggest night of his career. Both approaches have logic, but once the mind is tested under fire, only one game plan survives. That's when we discover who truly understood the assignment. So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community, and that means I'm interested in your thoughts, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I'm interested in your observations. Now, if you want to support the channel, press like, hype, and subscribe. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.